The evening had that cozy stillness I love. Just me, the warmth of the kitchen, and the soft hum of the house settling in. I was folding Ricardo's shirts, one by one, thinking about how far we've come. When I heard the front door open, my heart did that silly little flutter it still does after all these years. He walked in, eyes shining like a boy with a secret. "I got the promotion," he said, grinning from ear to ear. And in that moment, my world felt so full, so right. I rushed to him, arms around his neck, laughing into his shoulder. "I knew it," I whispered. "You've worked so hard. You deserve this." And I meant it. Every word. I've seen his late nights, the stress, the sacrifice. I've stood beside him when things were uncertain, always believing his time would come. This felt like a victory for both of us. A new chapter. A promise. Later, as he explained there'd be a company dinner, employees only, I tried not to let the pang of disappointment show. I nodded, smiled, told him I understood. Of course I did. I trusted him, always had. I straightened his tie before he left, smoothed down his collar, kissed his cheek. "You deserve this," I said again. And I meant that too. As I watched him walk out the door, I felt something warm settle in my chest. A quiet kind of pride, like I was watching the man I chose finally step into his light. I poured myself a glass of wine, lit a candle, and let the glow of the moment fill the room. Life hadn't always been easy for us, but somehow, this felt like a turning point. The kind that makes the struggles worth it. The kind that whispers, "You made it." I imagined him standing in a room full of colleagues, confident, charming, finally being seen for everything I always knew he was. I pictured them raising glasses in his honor, and I smiled, thinking how lucky I was to be his wife. I never needed the spotlight. I was happy cheering from the sidelines. His success was mine too. That's how love works when it's real. Later, I padded around the house in slippers, letting the evening unwind slowly. A quiet bath, a favorite book. I even pulled out the good blanket from the closet, the one we only used on special nights. Because tonight was special. Not because of the promotion, but because I felt so sure of us. So safe in this life we'd built. And I fell asleep that night believing we were exactly where we were meant to be. The next morning, I woke up still smiling. I set the table for two, even though I knew he wouldn't be back until later. Habit, I guess. Love has a way of filling the spaces, even when they're empty. I found myself humming as I watered the plants, folded throw blankets, even picked out a little gift bag to surprise him when he got home. Just a small token, something to say, "I'm proud of you." The day drifted by with that same sense of warmth. I texted him a few times. Nothing clingy, just little things. "Hope it's going well," or "Don't forget to eat." That's who I've always been with him. Supportive, present, rooting from the background. And when he didn't reply right away, I figured he was busy, surrounded by colleagues, making plans, shaking hands. It made sense. He was moving up. That evening, I curled up on the couch, letting myself imagine the future. Maybe a weekend getaway, a dinner out, a toast to what comes next. Everything felt open, promising, just waiting for us. So when my phone finally buzzed and I saw his name on the screen, my heart skipped again, this time with excitement. I thought, he's thinking of me too. But the moment I opened that message, everything changed. At first, it felt like any other buzz. Just a simple vibration from the phone on the coffee table, barely noticeable over the sound of the TV. I reached for it casually, expecting something sweet, maybe a "wish you were here," or even a quick photo of the menu. That's the kind of thing Ricardo would do, at least in the world I thought we lived in. I smiled as my thumb tapped the screen, My body relaxed, open, unguarded. But then the image loaded, and I stopped breathing. There he was, my husband. The man I'd just sent out the door with love still lingering on his collar. And next to him, her, wrapped around him like she belonged there, like she'd always been there. Smiling, radiant, too familiar. My hand froze midair, phone suddenly heavier, like it carried a different kind of gravity. A cruel one. Then the words, just beneath the photo, cut sharper than the image itself. He deserves a woman better than you. That one line shattered something I didn't even know could break. My vision blurred, my skin turned ice cold. In a second, everything I'd believed collapsed. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an accident. It was planned, meant to hurt, meant to humiliate, and it worked. The room around me disappeared. The flicker of the television, the ticking of the wall clock, even the soft hum of the refrigerator. All of it went silent. It was just me and that message, burning like a brand in my palm. My heart didn't race. It stalled. Like it couldn't believe what it was seeing either. I read the caption again and again, hoping I'd somehow misunderstood. But the cruelty was too deliberate to be a mistake. I tried to move, to stand, to breathe, but my body wouldn't cooperate. My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped the phone. Tears didn't come. Not right away. It was something deeper than sadness, like grief, but heavier. I sat there, staring at the woman in the photo, at the way she looked at him, like she knew she'd won. And for the first time in my life, I felt invisible in my own marriage. And then it hit me. This wasn't just betrayal. This was performance. This private dinner wasn't private at all. It was a setup, an unveiling. He didn't just choose someone else. He made sure I'd see it. And worse, so would others. My mind spiraled through questions I couldn't answer. Who sent it? Who else knew? And why now? But one truth rose above the noise. I had been erased. I sat there for what felt like hours, though the clock said minutes. The silence around me wasn't peaceful anymore. It was suffocating. My fingers clenched the phone so tightly they ached. I wanted to scream, throw it, smash something. But all I could do was sit in that numbness, replaying the image like a cruel loop. That smile on her face, his arm around her, that message, those words. I kept thinking, how long had this been happening? Was this the first time or just the first time he let me see? I searched back in my memory for clues I might have missed. Late nights, vague answers, sudden meetings. And each time I thought of a moment, it rewrote itself with new meaning. Love that once felt solid now looked full of cracks I never dared to notice. But in the center of all that pain, something inside me shifted. Not anger, not even revenge, just a quiet, sharp clarity. If this was the truth, then I couldn't pretend anymore. He didn't just betray me, he erased me from the story of his success. But he forgot one thing. I was never the footnote. And as I stared at that photo one last time, I knew. I wouldn't stay frozen. Not for long. The sun rose, but I didn't feel it. It came through the windows in soft, golden streaks, lighting up the same walls that had once felt safe. I hadn't slept. Not even a minute. I'd just sat there, wrapped in a blanket that didn't warm me, staring at nothing. But my eyes were dry now. The tears had burned themselves out. What replaced them was something colder, sharper, like steel being forged inside me. I stood up slowly, every joint stiff from the weight of the night. I didn't look in the mirror. I wasn't ready to see her yet. The woman who'd gone to sleep believing in love and woke up a ghost in her own home. But something inside me whispered, "Get up." So I did. I made coffee, not out of habit, but out of defiance. My hands were still shaking, but my mind was beginning to clear. I picked up my phone, not to cry or plead, but to search. First her face, then her name, then connection after connection. Every click revealed a new layer, and suddenly, I wasn't just a wife mourning a betrayal. I was a woman gathering proof. His story was full of holes, and now I had reason to dig. Every photo, every message, every whispered excuse. I wasn't looking for closure. I was preparing for something else entirely. I opened the laptop like I was clocking in for a job I hadn't asked for, but one I intended to finish. His digital life wasn't as hidden as he thought. A few quick searches, some familiar passwords, and suddenly, his world was cracked open. Calendar entries that didn't match his words, hotel reservations, late-night ride shares to places he never mentioned. I wasn't shocked anymore. I was focused. Her name appeared in emails, flirtatious, careless, as if I didn't exist. But it wasn't just her. It was others, too. Patterns. Repeats. He'd been lying long before this woman entered the picture. That message wasn't the beginning. It was the reveal. And now, I had the truth. Not speculation, not emotion. Evidence. Tangible. Undeniable proof. And the more I found, the calmer I became. Each screenshot I saved was a stitch in the armor I was building. Every forwarded email, a line drawn in the sand. The woman he thought was weak, broken, discarded, she was waking up. And she wasn't just done with him. She was done doubting herself. I whispered it, like a promise to the version of me who still hurt. You wanted a better woman? You're about to meet her. The printer whirred steadily as page after page slid into the tray. I watched each one like a piece of the puzzle falling into place. Dates, messages, photos, receipts. There was no rage now, just precision. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't crying. I was documenting, quietly, methodically, like a woman preparing for a meeting where she would no longer be ignored. I started writing emails, not to him, never to him, but to the people who mattered. His HR manager, a senior executive I'd met once at a company picnic, a client he'd mentioned too many times, too fondly. Every name was selected with care. These weren't revenge letters. They were formal, clear, backed with evidence. The kind of emails that don't get deleted. The kind that change outcomes. And as I sent the final message, I felt something shift deep inside. Not satisfaction. Not yet. But power, new and undeniable. He thought he'd taken everything from me, but all he did was free me from pretending. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was rewriting, reclaiming. And while he walked through his days unaware, I was already planning the moment the truth would walk in right behind him. The event was polished, corporate, perfectly staged. White tablecloths, clinking glasses, laughter rehearsed like lines in a play. Everyone dressed their best, including him. Ricardo stood near the center, wearing the same smug confidence he always saved for rooms full of important people. He had no idea today wasn't just about a contract. It was about consequences, and I was already in the room. I stepped in slowly, heels tapping with quiet confidence, my head high. Every detail of my outfit chosen for control, not approval. Heads turned. Some smiled in recognition, others stared with curiosity. I didn't belong in this setting, at least not according to him. But that was the point. I wasn't here as his plus one. I wasn't here to support him. I was here to end the illusion. I spotted the CEO first, elegant, guarded, the kind of man who read situations before speaking. I approached him without hesitation and introduced myself properly, not as someone's wife, but as someone with something he needed to see. I handed him the envelope, crisp and full of truth. I believe this concerns a matter of company policy, I said softly, just loud enough for a few ears nearby to catch. The CEO took the envelope with a polite nod, But as his eyes scanned the contents, his expression shifted. Controlled, but unmistakably tense. He turned to one of his associates, gestured quietly, and suddenly, a quiet corner of the room became the center of gravity. Whispers began to ripple outward, slow at first, like wind through tall grass. I didn't need to say a word more. The paper spoke for me. Ricardo noticed the shift. He always could read a room, especially when it stopped revolving around him. He looked toward the commotion, and then he saw me. For a second, he smiled, as if I'd come to surprise him, to celebrate his big day. But that smile faltered when he realized who I was standing with, and what I was holding. His steps slowed, his face tightened. Panic, just a flicker, cracked through. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't cry. I just turned slightly, met his eyes across the room, and spoke clearly. He lied to his wife, his company, and himself. But I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to make sure the right woman wins. My words were deliberate, calm, loud enough for the table beside us to pause. And in that moment, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel erased. I felt seen, fully. Ricardo tried to speak, to explain, to downplay, to salvage. But the room wasn't listening to him anymore. A few polite smiles faded. Conversations paused. The man who once thrived on being the center of attention was now exposed in the worst possible light. One of the board members stepped aside with the CEO, envelope in hand, and within moments, the polished atmosphere turned brittle. A woman from HR approached him, voice low but firm. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. The message was clear in his posture, his shoulders stiff, jaw clenched, the way his hands curled at his sides. He wasn't being congratulated. He was being evaluated and judged, not just by his superiors, but by every person in that room who had watched him celebrate a lie. I didn't stay for the fallout. I didn't need to. I'd said what mattered, delivered what couldn't be ignored. As I walked out, I felt lighter, not vindicated, but free. The woman who once held his tie and wished him luck had vanished. In her place stood someone new. Someone who didn't just react to betrayal. She rewrote the rules, and she was just getting started. Weeks had passed. The chaos had settled, the whispers faded, and the man who once stood tall in boardrooms now walked through shadows of his own making. But I wasn't watching anymore. My focus had shifted, to paperwork, to plans, to possibilities. I sat at a clean, sunlit desk, a pen in hand, about to sign something that mattered not because of what I left behind, but because of what I was building next. It wasn't about him anymore. It never truly was. The divorce papers were there, yes. But beside them were documents for a business loan I'd applied for quietly, confidently. A project I'd put off for years while cheering someone else on. Now it was my turn. And as I wrote my name in ink, it felt different than before. Firmer, fuller. Like a signature on a life I finally chose for myself. He'd tried to reach out, calls, messages, even a letter, hand-delivered and left unopened on my doorstep. But I didn't owe him words, not anymore. Closure doesn't always come from a conversation. Sometimes it comes from silence, from the click of a pen, from the steady sound of a woman moving forward. I didn't need to look back to know he was watching. I could feel it, and I let him. People had started asking where I'd been, what had happened. But I didn't owe them details either. I gave them smiles. Grace. A presence they hadn't noticed before, stronger, clearer. I wore my peace like perfume, soft but impossible to ignore. The woman who used to dim her light to make others comfortable now stood fully in the sun. And it felt good on my skin. I posted just one photo, nothing dramatic. Just me, outside the new office space I'd rented. Sun on my face, hair pulled back, one hand holding keys, the other tucked in my pocket. No caption, but one. The best revenge is proving you were always the upgrade. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't need to. The message wasn't meant for followers. It was for me. For the girl I used to be. For the woman I'd become. The other woman? She vanished. Whatever story they had built collapsed without a spotlight. No public apology, no dramatic exit, just absence. And honestly, that was enough. She had been a chapter, a painful, necessary one, but not the ending. My story was no longer about what they did. It was about what I would do now that no one else was writing it for me. That morning, I walked out of the glass office building where I'd just signed my name, on papers that mattered, on dreams I'd delayed, on a future that was finally mine. The city buzzed around me, but I moved through it with calm purpose. I wasn't just the woman who survived betrayal. I was the woman who turned it into blueprint, into fire, into fuel. I passed by reflections in the windows and didn't flinch anymore. I saw her, head high, spine straight, eyes clear, not bitter, not broken. Just awake, fully. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't wondering what he was doing or who he was with. I was walking forward, and everything behind me was exactly where it needed to be. Behind.
My name is Marissa Hale. I'm 29 years old, and for most of my life, I believed loyalty was the one thing you never had to doubt in a relationship. That's how I was raised. If you commit, you show up. You don't keep one foot out the door, you stay steady. That's exactly how I treated Ethan, my boyfriend of 2 years. I wasn't the kind of partner who swept him away on surprise vacations or made every night an adventure, but I was consistent. I worked hard at my job as an interior designer, came home exhausted some nights, and still found the energy to be there for him. I cooked, I listened, I reminded him of his worth when work got the better of him. I thought that counted for something. At first it did. Ethan worked in finance, a world of sharp suits, deadlines, and competition. He'd come home drained, and I'd sit with him as he vented, sometimes for an hour straight. I didn't always have stories to match, but I was always present. He once told me I was his anchor, the calm in his chaos. I loved that role. I didn't need to be exciting. I just wanted to be dependable, the person he could lean on without hesitation. But slowly the tone shifted. A few months ago, Ethan started mentioning a new hire at his office. Her name was Sabrina, a mid-level manager, confident, bold, someone who apparently knew how to command a room. At first it was just passing comments. Sabrina doesn't let anyone push her around in meetings. Sabrina knows her worth. She told the boss off about a deadline. Can you believe that? He spoke about her with a kind of admiration I hadn't heard in a long time. Not just her actions, but the way he said her name, as though it lingered on his tongue longer than it needed to. I told myself I was being paranoid. People talk about coworkers all the time. Still, something in me shifted. A splinter lodged itself inside me, small but sharp. Then one night, Ethan came home from a work happy hour, buzzing with energy. He tossed his jacket onto the couch and poured himself a drink. "You know, Sabrina was hilarious tonight," he said, grinning. "She's got this way of telling stories that has the whole table laughing." I forced a smile. "Sounds like you had a good time." He leaned back, eyes lighting up. "She's just different, confident, charismatic. People pay attention when she speaks." And then he looked at me, not directly, but enough for me to feel the weight of what wasn't being said. I asked quietly, "And you don't think people pay attention to me?" He rolled his eyes, dismissive. "You know what I mean. You're safe, predictable. That's not bad. It's just different." The word safe lodged itself deeper than any splinter. He tried to soften it, but I heard the truth. Safe wasn't a compliment. It was a polite way of saying boring. Over the next few weeks, little digs began slipping into his words. When I hesitated about buying something expensive, he muttered, "Sabrina wouldn't overthink it. She just does things." When I turned down a last-minute trip because of work, he sighed, "You're too careful. Sabrina would just go." It wasn't constant, but enough to sting. Enough to make me feel like I was living in someone else's shadow. I didn't confront him, not yet. I thought maybe it was just a phase, or maybe he didn't realize how cruel the comparisons were. So I kept showing up the way I always had. Patient, loyal, steady. But here's the truth about betrayal. It doesn't come crashing down all at once. The cracks form long before the wall collapses. And in those nights where I lay awake beside him, pretending to sleep, I already knew something was shifting, something I couldn't ignore forever. The more Ethan talked about Sabrina, the harder it became to pretend I didn't notice. At first, it was little things, her name casually woven into stories, but soon it felt like every conversation circled back to her. I'd ask about his day, and before long, he was telling me about something Sabrina said in a meeting, or how boldly she challenged a client. The admiration in his voice wasn't just professional. It carried weight, an undercurrent I couldn't ignore. One evening, while cooking dinner together, I asked if he wanted more garlic in the pasta. He barely looked up from his phone. Sabrina swears garlic's the secret to a good sauce. She made this roasted chicken once for the team potluck, and everyone went crazy for it. I stared at him, the knife in my hand frozen midair. Was he really bringing her up over garlic? I didn't say anything, but the silence between us thickened. It got worse at social events. At a friend's birthday, he told a long story about Sabrina standing up to a demanding client. The whole table laughed at his retelling, but all I could hear was how much pride he carried in her boldness. Pride that used to be reserved for me. Later that night, as we walked to the car, I teased, "You really admire her, don't you?" He shrugged, unbothered. What's not to admire? She's fearless. And then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "You could be like that, if you weren't so cautious all the time." The words stung more than I let show. One night, we were curled up on the couch, him with a glass of whiskey, me scrolling through design ideas on my tablet. Out of nowhere, he sighed. "You ever think maybe you play it too safe, Marissa? Life's short. Don't you ever wonder if you're missing out?" I put my tablet down slowly. Missing out on what exactly? He hesitated, then smirked. On people who actually take chances. The implication hung between us. I tried to steady my voice. "So, you're saying you'd rather be with someone like Sabrina?" His smirk widened, like he enjoyed watching me squirm. "I didn't say that." But he didn't deny it either. That night, after he fell asleep, I lay in the dark staring at the ceiling. His words looped in my mind, twisting into something sharp. Predictable, safe, too cautious, not enough. I thought about all the times I'd chosen him first, canceling plans to be home when he needed me, putting his career deadlines before my own rest, listening for hours without expecting anything back. And now I was the consolation prize, the dependable placeholder. I caught my reflection in the window, the city lights flickering behind me. For the first time, I wondered if I'd become invisible in my own relationship. The cracks were widening, and I could feel something coming, though I didn't know it yet, the moment where those cracks would finally shatter. The collapse didn't come with yelling or slammed doors. It came quietly, like a knife sliding between ribs. It was a Thursday night. I'd cooked dinner, simple pasta, a bottle of Red Open on the counter. We sat on the couch afterward, him scrolling through his phone, me half watching a design show on TV. He started talking about work again, and of course, Sabrina. "She practically took over a presentation today," he said with a laugh, shaking his head. "She threw out half the slides and redid everything in under an hour. And everyone loved it. The woman can talk her way out of anything." I muted the TV. "You mention her a lot, Ethan." He blinked, like he hadn't even noticed. "Do I? She's just the kind of person people notice. You'd like her if you met her." I studied him. "Maybe. But do you realize how it sounds when you keep comparing me to her?" Something flickered in his eyes. Irritation, not guilt. "I'm not comparing. I'm just saying she's impressive." "And I'm not?" My voice was sharper than I intended. He sighed, setting down his glass. "Marissa, you're stable, reliable. That's a good thing. But Sabrina, she's bold. She takes risks. Sometimes I wish you'd be more like that." There it was. No subtlety, no filter, just the truth, raw and careless. I felt my throat tighten. "So, you want me to be someone else?" "I didn't say that." His tone grew defensive. "I just mean you overthink everything. Life's short. Don't you ever wonder if you're missing out?" The silence between us was heavy, electric. And then he smirked. Not a nervous smile, not regret. A smirk, like he wanted to test how far he could push me. "Honestly," he said, swirling the whiskey in his glass, "if Sabrina wanted me, I'd leave you tomorrow." The words sliced through me, cold and precise. I stared at him, my pulse loud in my ears. "Say that again?" He shrugged, careless. "Don't act surprised. You know it's true." Something inside me shifted. A door slammed shut. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't beg him to take it back. I just looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth written across his smug expression. He wasn't bluffing. He wasn't joking. He believed it. All the months of comparisons, the little digs, the subtle undermining, it had all led here, to the moment he told me, without hesitation, that I was disposable. So I nodded, slowly, almost to myself. No, Ethan, you've said enough. I unmuted the TV. The chatter of the design show filled the silence like nothing had happened. His smirk faltered. Wait, that's it? You're not going to say anything? I kept my eyes on the screen. No, you said everything I needed to hear. For the first time in our relationship, he had no comeback. He shifted beside me, restless, sipping his whiskey like it might drown the unease. But I was already gone, sitting right there next to him. That night, I lay awake in the dark, my body next to his, but my soul miles away. He scrolled on his phone like always, oblivious. But I wasn't the same woman I'd been an hour before, because now I knew exactly what I had to do. The next morning, I woke before Ethan. He was sprawled across the bed, hair messy, phone still in his hand from scrolling until he passed out. He looked peaceful, like nothing had happened. But I remembered every word. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring into the steam as if it might give me answers. I didn't need them. I already knew what had to be done. 2 years of patience, loyalty, and devotion. And in one sentence, he'd told me exactly where I stood, a placeholder until someone better came along. When he finally padded into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, he smiled faintly. Morning, you're up early. I nodded, calm. We need to talk. His smile faltered. That sounds serious. It is. I set my mug down and met his eyes. What you said last night about Sabrina, about leaving me if she wanted you, that wasn't a joke, was it? He froze, then forced a laugh. Come on, you're still hung up on that? I was just being dramatic. No, I said quietly. You meant it. His arms crossed, his voice sharpening. You're overreacting. Couples say dumb things sometimes. It doesn't mean anything. I shook my head, and it means everything. You showed me where your loyalty stands. I'm not going to compete for basic respect. His mouth opened, then closed. He stared like he couldn't believe I wasn't caving. So what? He snapped. You're breaking up with me over one sentence? It wasn't one sentence, I said evenly. It's been building for months. The comparisons, the way you light up when you talk about her. Last night was just the truth slipping out. His tone grew sharp, almost desperate. You're seriously going to throw this away because I said something stupid after a glass of whiskey? I stood, steady as stone. No, Ethan. You threw it away when you decided to measure me against someone else. I'm not temporary. I'm not a placeholder, but you made it clear that's all I'll ever be to you. He scoffed, his face hardening. You're being ridiculous. You always overthink things. You'll regret this when you cool down. I picked up my mug, rinsed it in the sink. I'm not angry, I'm just done. The look on his face was almost comical, like he couldn't wrap his head around me, not fighting for him. He was used to having the upper hand, used to me smoothing things over, tiptoeing around his moods. Not this time. Fine, he snapped. If that's how you feel, then go. So I did. That afternoon, I packed a suitcase. My hands shook as I folded clothes, but my heart felt lighter with every zipper closed. He watched from the doorway, jaw tight, but said nothing. I think part of him still expected me to stop, to break down, to beg him to take me seriously. But I didn't. I wheeled my bag to the door, paused once to look back at the apartment. It had held laughter, warmth, late-night whispers. But it also held the memory of the night he reduced me to an option. That image was burned into the walls, and no amount of paint could cover it. Take care of yourself, I said simply. Then I walked out. The door closed behind me with a finality that echoed louder than any argument ever could. After I left, the silence was deafening. No late-night texts from him asking if I'd come home, no apologies waiting on my phone. Just nothing. And for a while, that nothing hurt. I missed the routine more than I missed him. Morning coffee together, lazy Sundays, the comfort of having someone beside me. But not him, not anymore. 2 weeks later, a friend of mine who worked in the same building as Ethan called me out of the blue. He didn't know the details of our breakup, just that we weren't together anymore. His voice carried that half-shocked, half-amused tone people get when gossip is too good to hold in. Marissa, he said, you're not going to believe what's going on with Ethan at the office. I braced myself. What about him? He lowered his voice as if Ethan could hear us through the phone. Apparently, everyone knows he had a thing for Sabrina. He was too obvious, talking about her constantly. People started whispering, and then... He laughed, unable to hold it back. Then Sabrina shut him down, hard. My stomach twisted. What do you mean? He tried it. Nothing physical, just a flirty comment when they were alone in the break room. She told him flat out she wasn't interested, that she had a girlfriend, that she loved her girlfriend, and that he needed to stop. I pictured it instantly, his smug confidence cracking in the fluorescent light of a break room, the rejection hanging between them like a dropped glass. My friend kept going. And Marissa? By lunch, everyone knew. Offices are like high school. Gossip spreads fast. He went from Mr. Confident to Mr. Desperate in about an hour. People are still laughing about it. I didn't laugh, not out loud, but inside a cold, quiet sense of justice settled in my chest. The man who once told me he'd leave me tomorrow if Sabrina wanted him, she didn't want him. She didn't even glance his way. And worse, now everyone else knew it too. According to my friend, the fallout was brutal. No more chuckles in the cafeteria when Ethan walked in. People avoided sitting next to him. The men who once slapped him on the back now gave him wary looks, like his humiliation might be contagious. The women in the office, they didn't bother hiding their judgment. In just a few days, Ethan had gone from admired to pitied, from confident to pathetic. And all because he bet his dignity on a fantasy that was never his to have. Meanwhile, I was finding my own rhythm again. I threw myself into work, spending long evenings on design projects that reignited my passion. I started running again. Late-night jogs with music in my ears, city lights blurring past me. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected while pouring all my energy into Ethan. With every day of silence from him, I felt stronger, lighter. He, on the other hand, had gambled and lost. The poetic justice wasn't in his humiliation. It was in my freedom. Because I no longer cared whether he crawled back, whether he regretted it, whether he understood the damage he'd done. For the first time in years, Ethan's choices no longer defined me. And that was worth more than revenge. It didn't take long before Ethan reached out. At first, it was short texts. We need to talk. Are you serious right now? This isn't how it's supposed to end. I didn't answer. Then came the longer ones. Walls of text, paragraphs filled with excuses. He claimed he was drunk that night, that the words slipped out. He said I misunderstood him, that he only wanted to push me out of my comfort zone. And then the one that made me laugh bitterly out loud. I was testing you. I wanted to see how much you'd fight for us. Testing me. As if reducing me to a backup plan was some twisted loyalty check. I stayed silent. A week later, fate threw us into the same aisle at the grocery store. I was tossing a carton of eggs into my basket when I looked up and froze. There he was, hair unkempt, dark circles under his eyes, pushing a half-empty cart. For a moment, he looked like he might turn around and run. But then he forced a smile and walked toward me. "Marissa," he said softly. "Hey." I nodded neutral. "Ethan." He glanced at the items in my basket, then back at me. "You look good." "I feel good." That threw him. His smile faltered. "Listen," he began, shifting uncomfortably, "about everything that happened. I messed up. I wasn't thinking. I said things I didn't mean." I tilted my head. "You seemed pretty clear at the time." He flinched. "I was just trying to get a reaction. Maybe make you jealous. I don't know. I thought if I pushed you, you'd—" He trailed off. "Treat you better?" I finished. His jaw tightened. "I didn't mean it like that. Look, things at work are a mess. People are talking about me, about Sabrina. I can't go back and change it, but I can change us. We were good together, Marissa. You know we were." I studied him for a long moment. There it was, the desperation behind his eyes, the cracks in his arrogance. He wasn't missing me. He was missing what I gave him. Stability, loyalty, a safe place to land when the world chewed him up. I took a step closer, my voice low but steady. "You're right, Ethan. We were good. Until you showed me how little I meant to you. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it." His mouth opened, then closed. His hands tightened on the cart handle. "So that's it?" he asked, voice tight. "That's it." I adjusted my basket, gave him a polite nod, and walked past him down the aisle. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one left behind. Walking out of that grocery store aisle, I felt lighter than I had in months. Not because I told Ethan off, not because he was humiliated at work, but because I realized something simple, something liberating. I was free. Free from the comparisons, free from his smug little tests, free from the way he chipped at me, piece by piece, until I questioned my own worth. The silence after leaving him had once felt suffocating. Now it felt like air I could finally breathe. At night, I'd drive with the windows down, music loud, the city lights flickering across my windshield. I wasn't mourning what I'd lost. I was rediscovering what I'd almost forgotten, myself. Every run I took, every design I finished, every moment I chose myself first, it stitched me back together. And Ethan? He was just a shadow fading in the distance. I thought about that night on the couch when he said, "If Sabrina wanted me, I'd leave you tomorrow." Those words could have broken me. For a while they almost did, but in the end, they gave me a gift, clarity. Because when someone shows you you're only an option, you stop offering them the privilege of being a priority. I don't hate Ethan. I don't even wish him pain. He created enough of that for himself. But I am thankful. Thankful he revealed who he truly was before I wasted more years believing in a version of him that never existed. Thankful that I walked away. Thankful that I didn't beg, didn't settle, didn't cling to scraps of affection. I chose myself, and that choice will echo louder, longer, and stronger than any betrayal ever could. As I tell you this now, I can see the arc of it clearly. Beginnings wrapped in loyalty, a middle tangled with comparisons, and an ending that cracked me open only to set me free. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Betrayal has a way of circling back in life. This wasn't the last time someone would test my boundaries or mistake my loyalty for weakness. The difference is, I'll never mistake their disrespect for love again. Because once you discover your own worth, you don't go back to being someone's backup plan. Not now, not ever. My name is Amanda Keller, and I'm 28 years old. If you ask my friends to describe me, they'd probably say I'm careful, maybe even cautious. I work as a software developer, make a decent salary, but I've always believed in saving for the future instead of chasing appearances. I drive a 2012 Toyota Corolla with a few scratches on the side, but a solid engine. I cook most of my meals at home, and if I go out, I'd rather spend the evening hiking under the stars than ordering overpriced cocktails in a rooftop bar. My friends joke about my meal prep containers, and my coworkers tease me for bringing the same brown rice and chicken for lunch. But honestly, I don't mind. I was saving for something bigger, a home, independence, a life built on stability, not impulse. When I first met Ethan, he told me that he admired that about me. We met at a friend's barbecue, and while everyone else was showing off new gadgets and expensive watches, Ethan leaned close and said, "You're different. I like that." At the time, it felt genuine. For the first year, we were happy. He laughed when I used coupons at the grocery store, and he teased me about my grandma car. But it was affectionate. I thought he understood me, or at least accepted me. But somewhere around the year-and-a-half mark, things shifted. It was small at first. One Tuesday evening, we went to Olive Garden for dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and breadsticks, the kind of night I liked because we could actually talk. But Ethan spent most of the meal scrolling Instagram, showing me pictures of his friends out at expensive restaurants. "Look at this," he said, pushing his phone toward me. His coworker and her boyfriend were dressed up at a sleek steakhouse downtown, the kind where parking costs as much as the meal. "See that bottle of wine? That's like $200. Looks nice, huh?" I smiled politely. "Sure, but I kind of like this. Just us. No crowd, no noise." He gave me a look I couldn't quite name, then went back to his phone. That look became familiar over the next few months. Every time we hung out with friends, I noticed how quiet he'd get on the drive home. I'd try to fill the silence, tell him about my day, but his mind was elsewhere. One night, after his friend's birthday party, he finally snapped. We had just pulled up outside his apartment when he turned to me and said flatly, "Your car is embarrassing." I blinked, stunned. "Excuse me?" Everyone else pulled up in actual cars, Amanda. Lisa's boyfriend has an Audi. Matt drives a Tesla, and we roll up in this. I looked around my car, the faded paint, the worn but clean seats. It was reliable, paid off, mine. "What's wrong with it?" I asked softly. "It's 10 years old, Amanda. It looks like something a college kid drives." "It runs perfectly. No car payments. Isn't that a good thing?" He sighed, exasperated, like I was missing the point. "Never mind. You wouldn't understand." That night, lying awake in my small studio apartment, his words echoed in my head. Embarrassing. It was the first time I wondered if he wasn't just teasing me, if he really did look at me with disappointment. I tried to shake it off, but something had changed. The warmth in his jokes had been replaced with resentment, and for the first time, I felt ashamed of the very choices that had once made me proud. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The weeks after that night were different. Subtle, but undeniable. Every time we went out with friends, Ethan would go quiet in the car ride home, his jaw tight, his silence heavy. At first, I thought maybe he was tired, maybe stressed from work. But then came the comments. Why don't you ever want to go somewhere nice, Amanda? Do you realize how it looks when everyone else shows up dressed to the nines and you? He'd let the sentence trail off, his eyes flicking to my thrifted dress. I tried to laugh it off, but each word chipped away at me. The breaking point came one evening in spring. He brought up a weekend getaway his friends were planning. Miami, beachfront hotel, bottle service, the whole package. It's Katie's birthday, he said. We're all going. You should come. I frowned. How much is it? He shrugged, like it didn't matter. Hotel's around $400 a night, plus flights, food, drinks, maybe $3,000 altogether. But come on, Amanda, you make good money. I stared at him. Ethan, that's 3 months of rent. We could take an entire vacation for that amount. He scoffed. It's not about us. It's about showing up for my friends. I get that, I said, keeping my voice calm. But it doesn't make sense to spend that much for 3 days. His face hardened. You can't afford it, can you? I can. I just don't want to throw away money on something so temporary. He stared at me like I was speaking another language. You make 75 grand a year, Amanda. Why are you acting like you're broke? I felt my chest tighten. It's not about being broke. It's about priorities. He leaned back, arms crossed. And apparently your priorities don't include making me happy. That line, the bitterness in it, lodged itself deep inside me. I sat there frozen, trying to think of a response, but all I felt was the quiet realization that no matter what I said, it wouldn't be enough. A few weeks later, the signs became impossible to ignore. It started small, a new watch on his wrist, shoes I knew I hadn't seen before, designer sunglasses casually left on his kitchen counter. Where did all this come from? I asked one night, trying to keep my voice light. He smirked, sliding the watch around his wrist. Does it matter? Yes, I said firmly. Ethan, that's a $1,000 watch. You've never spent money like that before. He looked at me then, not guilty, not apologetic, almost smug. At least someone thinks I deserve nice things. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Her name spilled out of his mouth like it was nothing. Vanessa, older, successful. She appreciated him. She bought him things. She took him to places I apparently couldn't. She treats me like I'm worth something, Amanda. Do you? The words hit harder than I expected. My voice shook when I asked, So, how long? He shrugged. A couple months. It's not like that, though. She just gets it. Gets what? That you like being bought? That I'm not embarrassed by wanting more. I stood there, staring at the man I thought I knew, realizing that the slow erosion of us hadn't been my imagination. It had been deliberate. And then, with a cold little laugh, he said it. You're too cheap to deserve me. I don't remember leaving his apartment. I don't remember driving home. I only remember sitting on my bed, the city lights flickering through my blinds, and thinking, cheap. That's what he saw when he looked at me. Not smart, not disciplined, not building a future, just cheap. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't cry over him. I just felt hollow. But somewhere inside that emptiness, a tiny spark lit up. Not anger, not revenge, just the beginning of clarity. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No text from Ethan, no good morning calls, no apology, just nothing. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the chipped paint on the wall, trying to figure out what I was supposed to feel. Sad? Angry? Betrayed? Instead, all I felt was relief. Relief that I didn't have to defend every choice I made. Relief that I could eat leftovers without judgment. Relief that I didn't have to measure my worth against someone's Instagram feed anymore. Still, his words echoed in my head. You're too cheap to deserve me. Cheap. Not careful. Not smart. Not disciplined. Cheap. It stung, but it also gave me clarity. Because deep down, I knew something Ethan never understood. I wasn't frugal because I couldn't afford things. I was frugal because I was building something. That night, instead of stalking his social media or crying into a pillow, I opened my laptop. For months, I had toyed with the idea of investing in real estate. I'd bookmarked articles, saved listings, even followed a few financial blogs. But with Ethan constantly complaining, I never had the mental space to pursue it. Now, the silence was mine. I dove in, researching duplexes, learning about FHA loans, reading forums where people shared their experiences with tenants and mortgages. I took notes like I was studying for an exam. And the more I read, the lighter I felt. It was like my brain had been waiting for this, a chance to use my discipline for something that mattered. Not to impress Ethan, Not to prove myself, just to build my life. When mutual friends asked why Ethan and I broke up, I kept it simple. We wanted different things. No one pressed. Maybe they already knew. Weeks turned into months. I worked late nights, packed my own lunches, and every extra dollar went into savings. I wasn't just saving for the future anymore. I was actively shaping it. And the strangest part, I felt free. Free from Ethan's criticism. Free from the constant pressure to keep up with other people's lifestyles. Free to imagine a future that was mine alone. One evening, as I scrolled through real estate listings, I paused on a picture of a small duplex in an up-and-coming neighborhood. 2 units, well-maintained, nothing flashy, but the numbers worked. The rent from one side would cover most of the mortgage. I ran the calculations 3 times just to be sure. Each time, the numbers lined up. My heart pounded. Could I actually do this? Ethan's voice echoed in my mind, mocking, dismissive, too cheap to deserve me. But this time I smiled, because maybe he was right. I didn't deserve him. I deserved something better. And maybe this duplex was the start of it? I clicked request information on the listing, my hand trembling, but steady enough to know one thing for certain. I was done shrinking myself to fit into someone else's idea of worth. From now on, I'd build my own. Closing day. I can still remember the smell of fresh paint and the nervous sweat on my palms as I signed the final papers. The duplex wasn't glamorous. The siding was a little faded, the kitchen tiles outdated, and the backyard needed serious landscaping. But it was mine. When the realtor handed me the keys, I stood in the empty living room, staring at the sunlight filtering through dusty blinds, and for the first time in years, I felt something Ethan had never given me. Pride. I wasn't just renting a space, I was building one. Brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. I moved into 1 unit that weekend, surrounded by cardboard boxes and secondhand furniture. The other unit I rented out to a young couple just starting out. They reminded me of who I used to be with Ethan. Hopeful, excited, full of dreams. Except this time, I was the one providing the roof over their heads. My friends noticed the change in me. "You look lighter," one of them said over dinner. And they were right. The constant weight of Ethan's criticism had lifted. For once, I could drive my old Corolla without feeling embarrassed. I could order the cheapest dish on the menu and not second-guess it. Life felt quiet, but in that quiet, I found peace. And then came Daniel. He was the brother of my tenants, helping them carry boxes up the stairs on move-in day. I noticed him because he kept cracking jokes while juggling furniture, his laughter making the whole process easier. When I offered them lemonade afterward, Daniel lingered. "You're the landlord?" he asked, a hint of surprise in his voice. "Yeah," I smiled nervously. "First property, still figuring things out." "Well," he grinned, "from the way my sister talks, you're already a better landlord than her last one. That guy charged her for fixing a broken sink." We laughed, and something in me softened. Daniel was different from Ethan. He wasn't flashy. He didn't drop hints about expensive restaurants or compare me to anyone else. He was a teacher, drove a 10-year-old Civic, and thought coupons were genius. Our conversations flowed easily. First about the duplex, then about books, then about life. Before I knew it, I was agreeing to grab coffee with him. On our 3rd date, he insisted on paying. When I teased him about it, he said, "I don't like feeling like I owe anyone." I blinked, then smiled. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," he replied softly, "but I want to contribute." The words hit me harder than I expected. After years of Ethan's resentment, here was someone who saw contribution as love, not weakness. For the first time, I began to imagine a future that wasn't lonely. But just when I was settling into this new rhythm, work, managing tenants, quiet evenings with Daniel, the past came knocking. Literally. It started small. A friend mentioning that Ethan had asked about me. A mutual acquaintance saying he'd been checking in on what I was up to. I brushed it off. Until one evening, I came home from work and found an envelope tucked into my mailbox. No stamp, no address, just my name. Inside, a handwritten note in Ethan's familiar scrawl. "I heard about the house. Impressive. We should catch up." I froze, the paper trembling in my hand. After all this time, after all the words he'd thrown at me, he wanted to catch up? I crumpled the note, tossed it into the trash, and told myself it was over. But deep down I knew Ethan wasn't gone, not yet. It happened on a Tuesday evening. I pulled into the driveway, groceries in the passenger seat, humming along to some song on the radio. At first I didn't notice the car parked near the curb, until I saw him. Ethan, He was sitting on my front steps like he belonged there, his shoulders hunched, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He looked smaller somehow, the arrogant spark I once knew replaced by something brittle. "Amanda," he said, standing as I approached. "Nice place." I froze, keys tight in my grip. "What are you doing here?" He glanced around the duplex, the little garden I'd planted, the fresh coat of paint on the mailbox. "I heard you bought it. Looks really good. Very you." I didn't respond. I just unlocked the door, half expecting him to take the hint. But Ethan wasn't here for hints. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice trembling in a way I had never heard before. I turned slowly. "About what? You made your choice." His jaw tightened, but then his shoulders sagged. "Vanessa. She wasn't who I thought she was. She lied. About her money, her connections, everything. When it all collapsed, she left me with nothing. Debts, bills, His voice cracked. "I made a mistake, Amanda." The words hung in the air between us. I studied him. The designer jacket that looked worn at the seams, the expensive watch no longer gleaming, his face lined with a desperation that money couldn't hide. "You want me to feel sorry for you?" I asked quietly. "No, I wanted you to know that I get it now. I get what you were trying to do. Building something, saving, being responsible. You were right." He swallowed hard, and I was wrong. Something inside me ached. Not because I wanted him back, but because a part of me had once begged for these words, and now standing in front of him, they felt hollow. Too late. "What do you want, Ethan?" I asked. He hesitated, then whispered, "Another chance." I almost laughed. "Another chance? After everything?" I was stupid. I was chasing things that didn't matter. You matter. You always did. His voice broke, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not the fear of losing money, but the fear of being alone. I shook my head. "No, Ethan, you didn't lose me because you made a mistake. You lost me because you never valued me to begin with." At that moment, headlights swept across the driveway. Daniel's car. He stepped out, smiling as he saw me, until he noticed Ethan. His brows furrowed, protective instinct kicking in. "Everything okay?" I took a deep breath. "Yeah, perfectly fine." Turning to Ethan, I gestured. "This is Daniel, my boyfriend." Daniel walked up, setting his arm gently across my shoulders, a silent gesture of solidarity. "Nice to meet you," he said coolly. Ethan's face fell. The realization washed over him in waves, that I had moved on, that someone else stood where he once did, and that this time I wasn't shrinking. "You replaced me?" he spat, his voice sharp. "No," I replied evenly. "I outgrew you." For a moment, silence, the kind of silence where truth settles like dust after a storm. Daniel squeezed my shoulder. "Dinner's waiting inside." I nodded, then looked at Ethan one last time. "You wanted more, Ethan, and you got it. Just not the way you thought." He opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came. His shoulders slumped. Without another word, he walked back to his car. The taillights disappeared into the night, leaving only the sound of crickets and the faint hum of the street lamp. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding. Not from fear, but from release. For the first time, I wasn't the one left standing empty. 8 months have passed since that night on my front steps. 8 months since Ethan stood there, broken, asking for something I no longer wanted to give. In those months, my life hasn't turned into a fairy tale. It's better, because it's real. Daniel and I got engaged in December. The proposal wasn't a grand spectacle, no rooftop champagne or skywriting. Just the two of us, in my kitchen, cooking pasta together. He pulled out a simple ring and said, "I don't need fancy, I just need us." I cried, not because of the size of the ring, but because of what it meant. Commitment, partnership, love that wasn't measured in dollars. We're planning a small wedding next fall. Nothing flashy, just close friends, family, and a garden strung with fairy lights, and every detail feels like ours. Meanwhile, Ethan's name still floats around in whispers. A mutual friend mentioned he moved back in with roommates after Vanessa's debts swallowed him whole. The luxury cars? Leased. The jewelry? Pawned. The lifestyle? All smoke and mirrors. Once hearing that would have satisfied me. Karma, neat and perfect. But when I picture him now, I don't feel triumph. Just distance. Like a chapter I read long ago. Sometimes I wonder if he ever truly understood why we failed. If he realized that the very things he mocked, my frugality, my discipline, my cheapness, were the foundation of everything he claimed to want. But mostly I don't wonder at all, because I'm too busy living. On weekends, Daniel and I work in the garden outside the duplex. Tomatoes, peppers, herbs. Nothing expensive, just little things that remind us of growth. We laugh over crooked carrots, share coffee on the porch, and dream about the next property we'll invest in together. Yes, we're already planning the next step. A small apartment building that needs work but has potential. Daniel says he's excited to learn about being a landlord. I tell him I'm excited to build something side by side. Sometimes, when the sun sets just right, I stand in the yard and breathe in the scent of soil and basil, and I realize something simple but profound. Ethan was right. I was too cheap to waste my time, my heart, and my future on someone who couldn't see my worth. Because I didn't deserve him. I deserve better. And now, finally, I have it.